This is the challenge of the conscious human being. And through the process of overcoming, of working with cravings, when I can say, I'm the master of my desires, I enjoy my desires, I enjoy the pleasures, but that enjoyment does not take mastery over me. Rather, I develop the capacity to be a master over those impulses, over my cravings. The question of cravings, addiction to the material world and to material temptations is a really it's a very real question, and it's a very real question on the spiritual path. When the 12 spies go into the land to scout it out, which is the primary story of Shalach, this week's Parsha, they come back, and 10 of them give a negative report about the land and advise not to enter into it. Now, the Slonim has a very insightful, very deep take on that that has to do with how we handle cravings. So let's jump right in. ובעוד דרך יש לבאר, והנה הקשו המפרשים על תחילת דברי המרגלים. And there's another way to explain the question that a lot of the commentators asked about the first words of report when the spies, or as somebody said, I don't like the word spies. I don't love the word spies myself. Let's call them the explorers. So when the explorers come back from the land of Israel, what are the first words as they're reporting? Banu el haaretz asher shlachtanu, v'gam zavat chalav udvash hi, v'zeh pirya. They say, we came to the land to which you have sent us, and they're speaking here, you is Moses and the people. And yes, she is a land of milk and honey, and here is her fruit. And as we know, they were carrying a giant bunch of grapes. Efes ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz. But the people who live there are very strong. V'ha'arim betzurot gedolot me'od. And their cities are large and fortified. V'gam yelidei ha'anak ra'inu sham. And we saw the descendants of the giant there. שהרי באו לדבר בגנות הארץ. So their overall report is derogatory, is negative. They are they're coming back with bad news about what the land of Israel is. ומדוע פתחו בשבחה, שגם זבת חלב ודבש היא וזה פריה. So then, or therefore, why did they begin by praising the land? Asks the Slonimer. And the rabbi, ויש לומר על דרך העבודה שכאמור המרגלים היו אנשים גדולים. And we need to mention that these explorers, these spies, they were great people. And they were great in rank. Perhaps they're also great in stature and personal qualities, but what he's referring to here is that the explorers were actually chosen from among the leaders of each tribe. So these are people who are highly qualified, highly regarded, each within his own tribe, and considered to be holy people, to be saintly, to be to be spiritually really above the crowd, above average. וטעותם הייתה מחמת שסברו שארץ ישראל היא המקום הגרוע ביותר ברוחניות לעם ישראל. And their mistake was that they concluded that the land of Israel was the worst place spiritually for the people of Israel. מחמת שהיא ארץ זבת חלב ודבש, because it's a land of milk and honey. והיינו שיש בה הפלגת תאוות אכילה, because it's a land in which the lust for food, the craving for food, is great, greater than any other place. באופן שאין דוגמתו באף מקום. There is no second to a place where the craving for food is so great, they say. וזה פריה, שפריה משונה כל כך לטוב. And this is why they conclude that first sentence by saying, and here is its fruit. What they wanted to show when they brought the huge cluster of grapes is that, look at this fruit. There is no fruit as large as this anywhere else. And this is a reference, a textual reference to the fact that that so are the cravings for the fruit. And you can see where this goes. This is not just speculative. Grapes. We make wine from grapes, right? So there's a craving for alcohol, the craving for wine, the craving for grapes. Grapes were considered a delicacy at the time. Think about the Roman dignitaries, laying on their sofas, and their slaves are serving them grapes, right? Grapes were the Coca-Cola, you could say, or the caviar of biblical days, right? And they're saying, look at this stuff. This is the stuff that just brings up all your worst cravings. In other words, that is what the explorers are reporting back. It's a great land, but the temptations are so great that this is going to bring us down spiritually, is what they say. And that is why they continue to say the people who live in that land are strong. That's meaning, that's hinting that the power, the opposing forces, or the power of what's called klipa, of the shell. This is the Kabbalistic term that talks about the negative forces, opposing forces, obstacles, right? He says, so to say that the people who live there are strong is a metaphor for the spiritual forces that are opposing and challenging are really strong. And this is precisely because of the goodness and the abundance that there's no second to anywhere else in the world. ולכך שם מקור הקליפה, אשר עמלק יושב בארץ הנגב, והחיתי והיבוסי, etc. And therefore, this is also the land which is the source of the shell, of the opposing forces, And it's also hinted when it says Asher Amalek. Amalek lives there in the Negev, and the Hittite and the Yebusite, all 7 people who, the peoples who were living in the land of Canaan before the entry of the people of Israel, are here considered as hints to the 7 opposing spiritual forces, the Klippa. כל כוחות הקליפה של הזין עממין השוכנים בארץ ישראל נובעים מזה שהיא זבת חלב ודבש. All the shells, the klipa, extend from the 7 people who live in the land, and this extends from the fact that it is a land of milk and honey. Makom shel haflagat hatavot, a place where cravings abound. וטענו המרגלים שישראל אינם יכולים להיכנס לארץ ישראל כי יטבעו שם בזוהמת התאוות. So the 10 spies claim that no, we cannot go into the land because we will drown there in the filth of cravings. ולא יוכלו עמוד בזה והתבטלו אל כוחות הסטרא אחא. And we will not be able to handle that, and we will be taken over, dominated by the force of the opposing forces. ואם במצרים נתנסו בניסיון העוני, אך כאן יעמוד בפניהם ניסיון העושר. Even though in Egypt they have had to face the challenge of poverty and slavery and difficulty, but here they will be facing the challenge of prosperity, and on that they will not be able to handle. It's an interesting suggestion that the challenge of abundance is greater than the challenge of scarcity. It's very interesting. And again, this is not speculative. I think it's intuitive. We all know that in some ways it's much easier to deal with the things that we don't have, or it's much easier to deal with the pain of lack than dealing with the pain of having too much choice. And he's going to talk a little bit about why that is and how that works. But experience, and it's interesting that he touches on that. וזה שאמרו וגם זבת חלב ודבש הוא לא בתור מעלה, אלא שזהו הגורם לפחיתותה. And that is why they say that the fact that the land is one of milk and honey is actually not it's not a compliment. And the Slonimer continues. אך באמת, טעות הייתה בידם. But in truth, they were mistaken. ומשה עצמו לא חשש כלום מטענתם. And Moses himself had no concern with their claim. He had no, he didn't buy it, in other words. He didn't see any issue with what they were presenting about the land presenting too much temptation and too much of the potential for succumbing to cravings. So I want to invite us to, as we're considering this, to kind of start making the connection to our lives. What are cravings in our lives? What are cravings in your life? I want to tell you that I know people for whom cravings are really critical and almost life-threatening. For some people, cravings actually ruin their lives, their livelihood, their relationships, their families. And those are people who suffer from addictions. So when we're talking about cravings as a spiritual obstacle or a spiritual opportunity, this is not far-fetched. This is not religious talk. This is real talk. So what is it? Is it cravings for food, for alcohol, for sex, for screen, for pornography, for workaholics, for work, for needing to be busy? What in our abundance, what in the world, in the physical world we live in, that brings us pleasure and security and opportunity can also drown us in an obsessive compulsive attachment, which we call craving. So this is real stuff. I really want to bring it down to earth, to our earth, because as I read this, I see your life and my life, being explored. וזה כל תכלית הבריאה, שהתאווה הקדוש ברוך הוא שתהיה לו דירה בתחתונים. And now the Slonim continues to say, this is why Moses was not fazed by that. Moses did not share that concern. And here's why. This is going into a little bit of Kabbalistic philosophy. The whole purpose of creation is that the Holy One desired to have residence in the lower world. So this is a well-established concept that that God creates the world so God could inhabit the world. But how does that happen? How does God inhabit the world? וכל הבריאה מיוסדת על כך שכל ההנאות תעמודנה לרשותו של אדם, ואילו הוא יתגבר ולא ימלא תאוותו. שעל ידי זה עושה להשם יתברך דירה בתחתונים, ושובר את כל כוחות הסטרא אחא. So very sweet. This is a little bit of a theological foundation. So all of creation is established on the dynamic that all pleasures should be available to a human being in order for the human being to overcome his or her cravings. Because through that process, the Holy One creates a residence in the lower world, in physicality, and shatters all the opposing forces. You see that? So our lives are purposeful in the service of the divine as we kind of sweep away the opposing forces. We sweep away that which you could say prevents God from residing fully in the world. Isn't that a beautiful metaphor? So we have these opposing forces. We have in Christianity, where they talk about that as the devil or demons, or but we don't use that language. But there's a sense of the forces that fill up spiritual space when God is not there. And who is in charge of cleansing out, of purifying away those opposing forces? This is the challenge of the conscious human being. And through the process of overcoming, of working with cravings, when I can say, I'm the master of my desires, I enjoy my desires, I enjoy the pleasures, but that enjoyment does not take mastery over me. Rather, I develop the capacity to be a master over those impulses, over my cravings. I say when and how much I will consume or engage with that abundance, with the milk and honey. When I attain that mastery, that's how I open the door for the divine to inhabit the world as in divine intended. According to this theology, what is our role? Now we can see that right here in the story of the spies, of the explorers. We are the spies. We are the explorers. We're the scouts. We're the ones who are, we're out there ahead of God, preparing room for divinity to come in and inhabit the physical realm. I don't know about you, but for me, this is really this is very empowering. It kind of feels good. Feels good to be God's scout. So that's a bit of this Kabbalistic theology. And let's go back now to the text and see how this gives us an understanding of the text in a different way, and also, I think, an understanding of a really core principle of Jewish mystical tradition, and hopefully will give us some good tools and perspective on our own lives as we deal with pleasure, mastery, regulating, self-regulating, etc. וזוהי התשובה לטענת המרגלים שישראל אינם יכולים להיכנס לארץ ישראל כי יפלו בתאוותיה ולא יעמדו כנגד כוחות הקליפה הנמצאים בה. And this is Moses' answer, or our answer, to the claim of the spies that the people cannot go into the land because they will be they'll fall prey to the forces of the cravings and the forces of the klipot that are in that land. Because the truth is that the whole purpose of creation is for a Jew, a person, a spiritual seeker, a spiritual worker, to do the opposite of what he or she craves. And I wouldn't, I would modify that, not do the opposite, but gain mastery over, be able to do the opposite of that which the first impulse of craving. וכל ההנאות נוצרו בכדי שליהודי יהיה כל טוב. And all the pleasures of the world were created for a Jew, for a person, to have abundance, to embrace thus. ואף על פי כן יימנע מלמלא תאוותו. And even with all the abundance, the practice of refraining is the core practice within the context of abundance. שעל ידי זה הוא שובר את כל כוחות הקליפה, because through refraining, a person shatters the klipa forces, or the opposing forces. It's a powerful message. It's a powerful message, and it's very core to the way Jewish tradition approaches spirituality. We know that there are other schools of thoughts in Christianity, in Buddhism, in Hinduism. I'm not sure of Islam. I'm not, or Sufism. I'm not sure. I think that probably with Sufism, it's a little more, a little closer to the Jewish spiritual tradition. Perhaps Native Americans are also a little closer to, but there's the traditions that preach asceticism as a spiritual path or mode are opposite, really, to the Jewish tradition, especially the Hasidic Kabbalistic tradition. We do not condone asceticism, and clearly this is expressed here. ומה ששלח אותם משה רבינו לראות, השמנה היא עם רזה, and the fact that Moses sent the spies when he instructed them before they left to explore the land of Israel, Moses asked them, come back and tell us, is this a fat land or a lean land? In other words, is this an abundant land or is it a barren land? הייתה הכוונה שידעו לקראת אילו ניסיונות עליהם להיערך. What he meant by that is he wanted to know what kind of challenges, spiritual challenges, should we prepare ourselves for. He didn't ask them to come back and say whether we could or could not go into the land. We were destined to go into the land. He asked them to come back and tell us, are we going to be challenged with this set of challenges or with that set of challenges? Specifically, are we going to be challenged with the challenge of richness, of abundance, or with the challenge of poverty and scarcity? Right? As of the paradigm of Egypt being, in Egypt we were challenged with scarcity and poverty. And when we go into the land of Israel, are we going to be challenged with scarcity or poverty, which is considered to be easier? Or are we going to be challenged with the big one, which is the one of abundance and prosperity? But whether the challenges are going to be of abundance or of poverty, it does not stop us from walking the spiritual path. We're gonna develop anyway. We're gonna practice anyway. We're gonna pursue spirituality anyway. We're gonna open the door for divinity anyway. Whether the challenge is greater or lesser, or the challenge is of one flavor or of another flavor. והמרגלים טעו ונפלו, כי לא היו בטלים למשה רבינו עליו השלום. And this is a very typical Hasidic comment, and the spies were in error. They failed because they did not humble themselves to follow to precisely follow the instructions of Moses. In other words, they inserted their own ego, they inserted themselves, their own concerns, rather than aligning and tuning in to the intention of their master, of Moses. And you can see this is exactly the Hasidic Rebbe and disciples dynamic, and that's a big also principle in specifically in the Hasidic world. The power of and the taking advantage of having a spiritual teacher and tuning in to the seeing and to the subtlety of the spiritual teacher, and avoiding the temptation of inserting, getting distracted by your own concerns. It takes a certain level of trust. The text in the Torah says, don't send just spies, send spies who will be aligned with your own intentions. And something broke down there. We talked about that in the previous lesson, I think it was yesterday. דהיינו אנשים הבטלים לדעתך כמו שהיו יהושע וכלב. And an example for that are Joshua and Caleb, Yoshua and Caleb, who were actually aligned with Moses and who surrendered themselves to Moses' intentionality. They were humble enough to become an extension of the intention of Moses, and that's why they came back rather with an encouraging report, and they differed with the 10 other spies. אך שאר המרגלים היו כולם אנשים ראשי בני ישראל, ולא הייתה להם התבטלות למשה רבינו עליו השלום. The other spies were leaders. Leaders, well, they were leaders, but because they were so great, because they were chosen from among the dignitaries and the leaders of the tribes, they were too wrapped up in their own importance to allow themselves to serve Moses and to tune into Moses's more subtle take on what the mission was. And therefore they failed. It is so real. It is so potent, not only as a mythic story or a theological consideration, but how do we deal with cravings? How do we deal with pleasures? How do we deal with the beauties and the temptations that life presents to us? The spiritual tradition, according to the Slonim here, teaches us that we are destined to engage, and above that, we're destined to develop mastery. That is the path, the spiritual path in our tradition. May we so be blessed. Thank you so much for sharing this Torah with us this morning. I'm Rabbi Reuben Modik with Makom Halev Community here in Nyack, New York, and with Hebrew Learning Circles, where we teach spirituality and exploration, where we're all spies, we're all learners, and we're all doing our best to find our own destiny, our own path within our tradition. Please like and comment below. I would love to hear your take, your thoughts on this beautiful teaching. I'd love to interact. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Come back again, where we'll be studying here at this the Hebrew Learning Circle Cyber Yeshiva, almost every day of the week. I look forward to seeing you again.